Next speaker, who is the keynote of the second session, Parr. He is a Forbes 30 under 30 award-winning. He is journalist, he is author, he is venture capitalist, he is entrepreneur, actually a man of many talents. He is co-founder of Octane AI company. He has written a book, Captivology, the science of capturing people's attention. This is a must-read book for marketers. This is how it was recognized by Forbes, by New York Post, among other sources. He is also writing a lot on marketing, on startups, on technology. So really a man of many talents and actually a man of good sense of humor, as I have already an opportunity to witness. So today he will explain what zero-party data is. He will probably complement to what Alexander has just said, and how it will change business and privacy. So Ben, go on. The floor is yours.
Well, hello, everybody. This is awesome because I get to have a complimentary presentation to what Alexander just talked about. I hope you can all see me. I know I have the cool, fun stuff. So I will go pretty lightning fast on a whole bunch of things because mine is a little bit more focused on the consequences of the transformation of data privacy. And I definitely want to have questions from our great moderator. And, if you want to slip some questions to him as well. So I'm going to cover very rapidly, like how Apple and Europe have transformed data privacy. What is this zero-party data? I will only lightly touch on that because I think Alexander's done a great job on that. But I'll talk a lot more about how it's transforming business at a larger scale and a larger sense. And like what's next and like how you as business people, as leaders in data privacy at many companies should be thinking about this overall long term. So the quick background on me, hello, there's me. I know it's kind of weird having two versions of me right there. I am president and co-founder of Octane AI. We power the data collection for thousands of Shopify and e-commerce brands, in particular, the quizzes that they take, the guided shopping experiences. And of course, he already explained all the other stuff, the book, my time as a journalist. So I spent a lot of time analyzing a lot of marketing and analyzing thousands of companies over the course of way longer than I want to go and admit. And there's the pretty copy of the book if you want to go and find it. And I use some of this in my talk and in my research. So let's talk about what's like the groundwork of like what's happening, why, as you probably just saw, zero-party data is probably one of the biggest buzzwords in data privacy. And that only really happened in the last 6 to 8 months, I would argue. So for the last decade, brands have really built their businesses on top of what I call the rented relationship. And you can kind of see over here, see how I'm going to do that for rent. And so these relationships have been rented, but Apple in particular started a wave that completely destroyed the way that brands used to do business. And so there's been a fundamental shift in the way business has been done for online brands in general. And so what do I mean by the rented relationship? He looks confused. And this is the typical ad strategy, right? The typical ad strategy is I take an ad. So prospecting ad is an ad where I'm trying to find an audience. I'm trying to get a customer to come the first time. I'm using the Facebook pixel to track them, and then I give them retargeting ads. And so retargeting ad is the ad of like, come on back. I know a little bit more about you. And so this has been the bench, like the way that e-commerce brands, brands in general online have built their businesses over the last decade. And it's because this has been really cheap to do. I cannot stress how cheap Facebook ads, in particular, out of all kinds of ads, have been really cheap. And a lot of businesses have been built on what I would call Facebook ad arbitrage. And you can see, just looking for bargains, when you have really cheap ads, you can drive lots of traffic to your website and you can arbitrage that into sales. Why would you not do that? And so brands have been doing that for years. That's worked out really well for them. But the problem is, like in the reality, Facebook actually was the one who owned these relationships. Brands were just renting that. They're renting the relationship with the brand. If they didn't pay Facebook, they wouldn't send the retargeting ad. You couldn't bring people back. it was fine when it was cheap, but no longer is it cheap. And the reason is because last year, Apple broke that relationship. And so I had to have like Steve Jobs doing the thing. So why did they break it? What happened? It was iOS 14.5, which we've talked a little bit about. iOS users were given the ability to opt in or out of data tracking. And the one that's most important is definitely Facebook/Meta, but it's ability to opt out of data tracking across the board. And a lot of this really did happen because of pressure from GDPR, from Europe in particular, in terms of data privacy. Do I think eventually Apple might have done this? Maybe, but nowhere near as fast. And so the act of government pressure started making companies like Apple figure out how to be proactive so that they would not be the target of lawsuits in the same way that, say, Meta has been, or Google even. And so just to like kind of give the note, lots of people really liked this. They really wanted to opt out. 96% of US users, as an example, opted out of data tracking in iOS 14.5, which is a crazy high number. And this number, it makes sense. Why would you opt in for this? And Apple knew this. And so now what's happening is if someone says they don't want Facebook to be able to track them, then brands can't show them those retargeting ads. They can't bring them back. Suddenly, the result has been just a wave of changes in terms of data privacy. There's this term that's been going around in ad circles called the cookie apocalypse, which I love a great branding name, as you can tell. And so the cookie apocalypse is the end of third-party cookies in general. And so with Google in particular, they're doing two things. One, they're going to end up killing support for third-party cookies. I think this will take some time. They're going to delay it a couple of times. They already delayed it once, but it is going to happen. And it's not happening because Google really wants to. It's because Google can see the writing on the wall from European data privacy changes and from Apple taking a lead on this. But the other one, just as important, is Google going to phase out the same kind of ad tracking on Android devices as Apple's done. The ability to opt into and opt out of data tracking is absolutely coming to Google. They may drag their feet a bit more, but it's happening. So the result, the headline speaks for itself, right? Like Facebook had one of the largest one-day drops, actually the largest one-day drop ever. And that is happening across the board for companies that are really heavily reliant on advertising. But it's not just even Facebook. It is actually, the ad conversion rates and the ad effectiveness across the board, which is affecting lots and lots of businesses, especially smaller businesses. We'll explain what's happening, what they can do, but it's affecting a lot of businesses across the board. And I have some graphs I'll show in a little bit. But what does this mean? Ad conversion rates have already dropped or they will drop. For most brands, it's already dropped. It's already a huge issue. Retargeting ads based on third-party data, they're just going away. Longer term, this will almost certainly not be a thing really longer term that any smart brand does. And as I think we've already discussed, businesses can no longer rely on this third-party data that they've been borrowing for cheap from Facebook and from other ad providers. They can't do that anymore. That era is done. It is a fundamental shift in the way marketing is and will be done over the next, for forever, really. And so, marketers being forward-thinking are not waiting around for, Meta to figure out a new way to make ads work. They're already shifting ad dollars. There's already tons of things changing. We'll talk about that. So what is zero-party data? I will only briefly do this one because I think the explanation we just saw was pretty great. Third-party data, that's the borrowed data from third parties and aggregators like Facebook and Google. No more cookies, says Cookie Monster. That is what the third-party cookie is for. Without that, third-party data becomes a lot less useful, if not useless. First-party data, the data you're directly tracking. This is Google Analytics, website data tracking. This is behavior, I like to say, that you can directly measure. That's Google Analytics. And then the number one for sure is zero-party data. That is the directly volunteer data. We especially focus on the quiz side, so asking questions. And so this is kind of what a zero-party data flow might look like. I love, by the way, flow charts, as you can tell. So attracting new people to your website, asking questions, recommending products, personalizing flows. Basically, you're taking this data, you're asking questions directly, getting a direct volunteer to opt in. But it's also, the best zero-party data marketing uses this data to personalize, say, the emails you send to a customer, the text messages you send to a customer. That's really fundamental to zero-party data marketing and what's happening there. And the equivalent, if you want a real life equivalent, you're trying to explain this to, let's say, your grandma. It's the equivalent of the sales associate in the store who's coming in and asking questions, helping you figure out what kind of shoe you're looking for, what size you are, what colors you're looking for. This is the fundamentally important part of, say, online retail, of in-person retail. Zero-party data is honestly just bringing that concept into online. That's how I like to think about it. And so this is actually specific examples of zero-party data points. If you're like, what does that actually mean? In different verticals. So in beauty, I might be asking questions like, what's your age? What's your skin type? What's your concern? What style are you? What's like your budget? If you have a pet, maybe is it a cat? Is it a dog? What's the size? What kind of food do they eat? What kind of allergies do they have? These are all really fundamentally important questions and data that you can only get by asking questions. And so this is specific examples of what zero-party data actually is when you get down to the core of it. So how does the zero-party data whole marketing piece work? Step one, you get an explicit opt-in from a customer for future outreach. This is the email or the phone number that you collect that most brands are asking for. It's more important than ever with retargeting ads going away. And this is like, using pop-ups or using quizzes to ask these questions and to get an opt-in at the same time so that you compare the data with, somebody's opt-in. There's your opt-in. It looks pretty. It's something like that. Sometimes it's horrible. Sometimes it's great. We'll talk about that. 2, learn about your customers by asking them questions. You're going to use something like a survey or a quiz to ask these questions. Quizzes have become very popular in e-commerce. As an example, Shopify, for example, did a future commerce study and said over 40% of e-commerce brands this year are going to implement some kind of quiz or data collection strategy as a direct response to what's happened with iOS 14.5 and data collection. And then, this is like the different kinds of quizzes that people are using to go and get this data. And then step 3, most important one, the one that I think we will see more of this year, using this data, this zero-party data to personalize the customer experience. And so essentially you're using these quizzes, surveys, other tools, hundreds of ways to collect this data, but always directly volunteered. And then you're sending it into, say, your email platform, your SMS platform, your CDP, as we talked about, to personalize the market. You can even use that data to help power your retargeting ads, which you can see over that way, which is a whole different thing. You use that data to supplement the targeting that you've lost as a brand before. Use that data to supplement the data tracking, the data targeting that you had before iOS 14.5. And this is a much more complex version of what that all looks like. You're going to ask a long set of questions. More questions is actually better sometimes. We can talk about that, but essentially actually making it engaging and useful to the end customer. Again, there's a reason why somebody would want to talk to an associate in the store. It's the same equivalent. I don't actually know what skincare routine I need. I don't know which products I need. Please help me. That's what's happening with these quizzes, with these zero-party data surveys, and then they take this data and they use it to personalize everything. So giving you the idea of what zero-party data marketing looks like, let's talk about actually how it's transforming business, my favorite part, and I'm hoping to have a couple minutes to answer questions. So I am trying to look a little bit into the future. I will not be perfect, but I do have a good track record of seeing what's going to happen in the future, and he seems to be pretty excited about that. So let's talk about the impact of data transformation. I'm going to do this with the guy. There we go. 1, the platforms, as it's become very clear to me at least, have way more data privacy power, honestly, than governments. What we've seen is governments can push things in a certain direction, but the real changes that happen across industries are because of platforms. And I'm talking about platforms like Apple and Google. Their power is even more pronounced than I had anticipated. The reason why Facebook's market cap dropped by over $200 billion is not because of any government doing anything. It is because of a single company, that would be Apple, launching a single feature that gave people the ability to opt out of data. And that is what made Meta go down the drain a whole bunch. And so just to remember, governments can go and do things and governments can move things in a certain direction. But the platforms in which everything else is built on have way more power to enact change and to transform business than any of us really give credit for or even realize. 2, small businesses are going to feel and are feeling much more of the pinch from data privacy changes. So here's an example of that in action. So ROAS is the return on ad spend. So you can see in the darker blue, that is the return on ad spend in 2020, 2021. Pretty decent, over 2x. If you put in $1, you get $2. I would take that deal every day of the week. And then you can see what happened when 2021, 2022, it dropped. It's much less than it used to be because of these data privacy changes. You can see March, April, May, when iOS 14.5 started coming out, it really affected, the conversion of these ads. And so some numbers for that. Return year and year on ad spend was down 22%. And the return on ad spend after the release of iOS 14.5, 40%, down 40%. Imagine if the revenue of your business went down by 40%. Like, it's a really big number. It's been I've worked with thousands of brands, and they've had to do fundamental shifts to their strategy because, again, they relied on these ads to do stuff, and that all went away. And here's another graph of as a result, what happened to ad spend. You can see right there, it went well down at the beginning, in the new year, return on the Facebook spend is dropping. And where is that money going to? We'll talk about it. But it's going to all sorts of other sources. And it's not even the super small brands. It's brands like Peloton who are being affected by this. And so I'm not telling you this is a good thing or a bad thing. I do think that people need to have the capability to opt out of data tracking, and that the way we did things before was never going to work long term because users want to have control. But businesses were not adapting fast enough, and now they're scrambling to adapt, which has led to a rise in zero-party data discussions, zero-party data topics. The only brands that are insulated in any way are very large brands with very large data sets already, because they built data sets over the course of years or decades. And I've had these conversations with larger brands who are less reliant on bringing in new traffic to Facebook ads because their brand names are well known, and Adidas or someone else like that. They're not affected quite in the same way. Everyone's affected, but not quite in the same way. 3, we kind of talked about this, kind of figured, but Meta and Facebook's road to recovery, which is even there. Nope. Will be difficult and may not even fully recover. I mean, this is a fundamental shift for Facebook. In the last, decade, Meta has been able to get across any challenge that it's been faced with, but this is a whole different kind of challenge. And I'm not to toot my own horn, but I did have some prediction around this back in 2014, because when Facebook acquired Oculus Rift, this is a blog post from my personal blog, they, bought Oculus for a lot of money. But the reason for that was because of Apple and Google. They wanted to build their own platform. They thought maybe VR would be the future platform. Let's own hardware for that so that we're not reliant on Google and Apple. And, the truth is for Google, for Facebook, for Meta, their worst fears came true. Their stock went crashing. There you go. As a result of it, it took a decade. It took 8 years for Mark's fears to be realized. But Mark's fears were realizing that he was unable to go and build a platform or get adoption for a platform that he could help control. And so without control of a platform, Meta will suffer. And Meta is not going to control a phone platform anytime soon. Lastly here, the most successful brands of the 2020s will be zero-party data businesses. There is a lot of good things if you do a good zero-party data strategy. This is honestly one of Octane's customers, Hunter & Gather. They're a European paleo food brand. They're in the UK. They use a quiz to ask what kind of food you're looking for, keto, that sort of thing. They have a conversion rate of over 20% on their website with their quiz, which is better than the average conversion rate of an e-commerce brand of 2 to 4%. And then, by using this data in their email, they've actually increased their email revenue by their email flows by 258%. These are real numbers. These are really large numbers, but these are also better for the consumer because it's a direct opt-in versus shady tracking. So I have 4 minutes. This is another example of another brand doing things. They shifted this brand, Jones Roads Beauty, shifted all their ad money from Facebook to TikTok, which we could talk about. And they sent all that money and all that traffic to a quiz page to collect zero-party data. And now they make 7 figures per month with a 3x return on ad spend by using that TikTok traffic and sending it in. And we're seeing more brands do things like this as a counterweight to what's happened with the drop in ads. Last, I only got a couple minutes. What's next? That's what everyone's always asking. We've already talked about these. This is like a lot of what's happening now. A couple more I want to talk about. One, marketing is really going to be focused on opt-ins. You're going to see a lot more brands really focused on getting people opt-in. Some will be, really helpful, like how do we send you your recommendations? You'll see that a lot on e-commerce websites. And some will be more shady, like just opt in. Here's 50 different pop-ups. I obviously prefer one of the two versus the other, but you're going to see both implemented over the next couple of years as people try to get more emails and phone numbers so they can directly market to customers. But marketing and a positive will get a lot more diversified. It will not just be Facebook ads. It will be across lots and lots of channels. You're already seeing it today with more money into ads and TikTok, but you're going to see it on YouTube. You're going to be seeing it in physical. You're going to be seeing more retail. It's getting really diversified. People are going to experiment. People are going to go to different places. People are staying in different places. Podcasts. It's all across the board. And again, the example of what's happening with TikTok, that's probably the biggest place where I'm going to see the biggest amount of dollars shift towards, because that's just where the people are. And then there's even other platforms who are not affected as much. If anyone can guess whose stock it is, maybe I'll give you some candy or something. I guess I can't send that. This is Google's stock price. Google's doing just fine. Why? Because most of their ads is not based off of this third-party cookie piece. It's based off direct intent. When you type in what you're looking for, in Google search, they don't have to, that's first-party data for them. They don't have to use third-party data to figure out who you are. They already have that information. They already know what you're looking for. So they're not anywhere near as affected as, say, a Facebook is by all the changes. There also will be a heated debate over, we'll call decentralization. I only touched this a little bit. We're talking about, of course, all the Web3 crypto kinds of things. And so, there's a whole group of advocacy. We've all seen all the stuff on NFTs and all that sort of thing. I'm not going to spend 10 minutes talking about that. I will just say, is Web3 the solution to, having more data privacy? Probably not, but it's going to definitely be and have a role to play in the whole affair. It's not going away. I'm happy to answer questions on that. I don't think it's the solution to data privacy, but it certainly will be some kind of piece. I just don't quite know exactly how. Zero-party data will be that bridge to the next era of data privacy. We are seeing a fundamental shift in how businesses run over the next year, over the next decade, really. And so the zero-party data movement is really going to be that bridge. I don't exactly know what marketing will look like 5 years from now, but I do know over the next 5 years, the zero-party data will be the drumbeat that a lot of brands go over because they know that to go and collect their own data. And this will rapidly evolve. If we come back next year, we'll be talking about an entirely new set of strategies, an entirely new set of laws, and an entirely new set of things. It's changing so rapidly. So in conclusion, this is what a lot of people thought the future of advertising might be. I'm going to track everything, automatically recognize. Honestly, that's not what I think it's going to be, because this is not what consumers want. They don't want to be creeped out. It's not going to be that. It's going to be about brands who really build community, who are really, finding ways to go and help their customers using zero-party data in a positive way. How may actually help you and serve you? And the brands that do that build communities, build positive relationships with their customers. They're going to be the most successful of all. And that's what's going to happen. So thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. It is early in the morning here in California. I can see the sun just rising right behind me. I'm perfectly on time. Thank you all so much. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ben. Really exciting presentation. I was really even thinking to myself whether you would predict and suggest us buying Google shares and selling off Facebook. But let's keep it a rhetoric question away. My actual question is about US and EU. What you've been telling here about is more about the US trends. Do you predict or maybe know that exactly the same is awaiting in EU marketing sector, or maybe it's already happening or happened?
It's already happening. Like I said, the Hunter Gatherer is a UK brand, and there's a reason why. The honest truth is that European brands tend to set the trends in terms of data privacy, and US brands tend to follow. Europe tend to set the trends in terms of data privacy, and US states tend to follow. And so the US is honestly a laggard every single time on this front. And so the zero-party data pieces like direct and explicit opt-in is being pioneered more by European brands because they have to. There's more consequences if you don't. US brands are starting to pick it up because there are some consequences, but also it is frankly a better way to do marketing. It's a better experience for the end consumer to, instead of be creepy and track, to actually like get that kind of like more explicit opt-in. So Europe is always setting the trend here.
Yeah, clear, thanks. What about zero-party data? What are your predictions? Where will we end up? Businesses doing their absolute best to get data, gaining trust. Where else? Is the zero-party data the end station?
I think zero-party data is the transition to the next station. I think the next decade, next 5 years at least, will be about this like zero-party data kind of movement. I think that there will honestly be a bunch of smaller brands that will not start up or will fail because they don't have the data set and they're overly reliant on Facebook ads in particular, or on just advertising in particular. I'm already starting to see that happen in the market. And I'm already starting to see investors move away for example, from investing in CPG and direct-to-consumer brands towards SaaS companies that have more capability to get recurring subscription and have been spending more money and more time in that area than in direct brand investments. I think that will result in less new brands being launched. And without an easy channel to bring people in, the only brands that are going to go survive are the ones who really build community, who really do grow something defensible and have real differentiation. I do think that is, in the long term, a good thing, but there will be entrepreneurs who will feel short-term pain as a result of it. And the brands that do succeed the most will be the brands that have embraced zero-party data sooner, because if you don't have the data, when Google turns off third-party cookies, you're in real trouble. And that's going to be felt by a lot of brands at a certain point, and lots of e-commerce brands and other brands across the spectrum, consumer apps, which also rely on using ads to get traffic in. They're doing the zero-party data piece now. They're really starting to talk about it. I'll lastly say, last year, I would talk about zero-party data and be like, what is that? When I get on the phone with some people, with a lot of brands, they're just like, we already know this. We're just looking for the solution.
Thanks, Ben. Really exciting insights and very clear predictions. We will live whether it will come true. So thanks.